This is Mrs. Coldwell broadcasting live from her basement while my kids play in the background. So, I thought this might be easier because I can explain the story to you, and this gives you ability to stop and start me whenever you need and record any of this information that you think is important, which is all of it, in your notes, okay? So let's just start by talking about characterization, because that's one of the most important literary terms you need to understand as you read Thank You, Ma'am by Langston Hughes. So characters are the story's actors, all right? So in this story we have Roger. Robot. No robots in the story. But we have Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones and Roger, of course. They are the only two characters in this story, so they must both be very significant characters. When we talk about characters, it's important for us to find similarities and differences between those characters and ourselves. Character buy-in is an extremely important quality. Those are the things that make you either like or hate a character. So if you think about a series that you watch, such as like maybe like Sons of Anarchy or Breaking Bad or any of those series that are on like right now, Grey's Anatomy, if you think about those characters, the more you watch that series, the more you either grow to love or to hate those characters. So that is you buying into those characters and beginning to understand their lives and their motivation. So character buy-in is important. Character traits are special qualities of one character. And there are different ways that authors deliver that information to us. One of those ways is called direct characterization, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is an author directly telling us what they want us to understand about that character. There is also indirect characterization, in which we get to make a judgment about that character based on information that is given to us. We learn about characters in the same way that we learn about people. Okay, so the people around us, we learn about them based on their appearance, things that they say, so their dialogue, private thoughts we don't get, okay, but we can imagine sometimes, actions that they take, and then the effects that those actions have on other characters. So those are some of the ways that we learn about people and the same ways that we learn about characters. So again, that is called indirect characterization.
I know!
And we have some robot theft going on here. We also can talk about terms such as dramatic monologue, and that features a single character who addresses one or more silent listeners. So if we think back to Harrison Bergeron, when Harrison is on the stage and he says, "I am the Emperor," that would have been an example of a dramatic monologue. We also see monologues in places like on Saturday Night Live. If you think about the very beginning, where there is just one actor or actress on stage delivering kind of a comedic speech to the audience with some inside jokes, etc., based on their life, that is another example of a monologue. So dramatic monologue is another way that we get information about characters. There are no examples of dramatic monologues in this story, however. Okay, soliloquies are also similar to dramatic monologues. No soliloquies in this story, but it kind of goes along with characterization and how we learn about characters. And it is when a character speaks his or her inner thoughts directly to the audience, okay? We've talked about flat characters and round characters, and you should know the differences between those characters at this point. A flat character may have one or two personality traits. They're not a very well-developed character, so there's not enough information there for you to really grow to like them or to hate them. A round character, though, has three-dimensional characteristics of real-life people. So those are the characters that you really begin to enjoy. Those are the characters that you may sometimes, over time, hate. Okay? So round characters are the ones that we are most invested in. Authors sometimes feature both round and flat characters in stories. Having too many round characters would just be way too complex. Okay, think of like Game of Thrones. There's a lot going on there. Okay? So then we also talk about stock characters, who are characters who fit our preconceived notion of a simple type. Like, for example, if you think about like a mad scientist character, those are always portrayed in the exact same ways, no matter what the qualities are, okay? So then we need to talk about character interaction, and we talk about protagonists and antagonists. Protagonists are they're good, they're the good guys of the story. And antagonists are the people or the person who is trying to prevent the protagonist from achieving his or her goal. So if we were to think about comic book characters, we would have protagonist, Batman, antagonist, the Joker. Okay? So good guy, bad guy relationship, and that is part of character interaction. Let's see. We could also have external conflicts that don't involve an antagonist that is a person. For example, you could have character versus society, like we saw in Harrison Bergeron. Or you could possibly have character versus another character. We explored that when we talked about The Most Dangerous Game. And we will also talk about character versus character when we explore Thank You, Ma'am. But you could also have character versus nature, possibly. If you're a Jack London fan or a Hatchet fan from middle school, that was character versus nature conflicts there. So there are other options as well. We also talk about internal conflict, which is when a character is struggling with some problem that he or she is struggling with from the inside. So within their own mind, this character is struggling with a problem. And we talk sometimes about dynamic characters and static characters, okay? Static characters are sort of like those flat characters. There's not much that changes about them. They just don't have very much depth. They're not very well developed, okay? So when we think about static characters, they're characters who are important but who do not change their thoughts and change their mind over the course of the story, okay? Dynamic characters, though, we talked about them before, those are characters who change in an important way, okay? So if you argued when we read The Most Dangerous Game that Rainsford was a dynamic character, then your argument was based on the fact that at the beginning of the story, Rainsford didn't think animals mattered because, or it didn't matter if you killed them, because they didn't have any thoughts or feelings. They felt pain, but no big deal because they were animals. By the end of the story, though, Rainsford has changed because he now understands that being hunted is an act that, or an activity that causes a lot of fear. Okay, so because he is put in the position of the animal, we begin to see the change in Rainsford from the beginning, where he was unsympathetic to the plight of the animal, to the very end, where he is in the position of the animal and understands the pain. Okay, so that was a dynamic character. Rainsford was a dynamic character that changed from beginning to the end of the story. We are going to explore dynamic characters, Roger and Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones, as we read Thank You, Ma'am. Okay? Let's see here. Motivation is the last thing that I'm going to talk about in terms of your character notes. That is the reason behind a character's actions, okay? And even when you guys do things, you understand your own motivation for things. Sometimes your parents may not understand that, but you understand your reasoning for doing certain things, okay? For, sometimes maybe not very smart things, but you understand the motivation behind that, okay? Authors rarely state a character's motivation directly. That's usually there for you to figure out.